What are gonna be the real consequences of COVID, like in 20 years? Kids who are just starting school this year will have a completely different experience for the rest of the school life. There have been studies about the first few foundation years of school being a clear predictor for the rest of your learning life. No idea what will be different. Just that these kids are not going to be like any other cohort of students. I'm hoping it'll lead towards good time management skills and good familiarity with technology. The latter is obvious. But I think there might be some merit in learning when to goof off and when to make sure you get things turned in on time and mostly correct so you can continue goofing off. Unfortunately, I think it'll make socioeconomic status more visible. Sure, some kids will make progress with school at home. However, I imagine that parents who already struggled financially and may not be able to stay home and help their kid will have issues. Some families may not be able to afford internet or a computer and their kids may end up with an inferior education through no fault of their own. That's absolutely true, and why internet access needs to be viewed as a necessary public utility. 20-year-olds rolling their eyes when their parents talk about COVID-19. Yeah, I think it will be something like this back in my days. I was at home for 50 days, so I think you can stay in your room for an hour. 50? I'm on day 72 with no end in sight. Here in Spain I don't know anymore. I stopped counting. At home since the 13th of March. I wonder how colleges/universities will be impacted. My college moved all its classes for the next 3 semesters online, and the first question that was asked was, will you be reducing tuition? I think if they don't, a lot of people won't be able to go to college or finish out their degrees. I'm a lecturer and I think it's really fascinating. On the one hand, students like to have a campus to meet their peers, to meet romantic partners, a quiet library, nice green space. They like face-to-face labs, even lectures, etc. The younger the students are, in general, the worse they seem to be doing with a totally online learning process, as they are not as good at self-direction as a 30-year-old doing their Master of Science, for example. On the other hand, it could make college much cheaper. Add to that the fact that some things simply must be done on site, like science labs for example. I don't see how some of the more hands-on degrees are even possible online. I'm 38. I went to college and grad school in my late 20s-mid 30s. My degrees in political science and English would have been super easy to do online. But if they had been online, I would have hated them, and definitely would not have been willing to pay as much. I don't care how much seamless integration there is. I did take several online classes and most of my other classes had online components, mainly for accessing some videos or PDFs. It's a much different experience than being in the classroom, and much of the joy and spontaneity is sucked right out of it when it's online. It quickly becomes nothing but work. I taught English 101/102 during grad school, and it was clear that students, while they love to scroll around on their ducking phones during class and do pretty much anything except pay attention, do not want to do their classes online. In 100 years they will be making memes about how the 20s of each century started with a plague. Edit. Wow. My first comment to get over 1,000. Thanks guys. Jokes on them. In 100 years they will be in their own plague. Haha. Suckers. Suck to be them. I'm an optimist. It will suck to be us. More jobs will become remote as employers realize it's more efficient and cheaper. Offices cost money. People cost more money than offices. Once everything is remote, the companies will hire the cheapest workers in other countries. My worry is that more jobs might be pushed abroad to cheaper countries when employers realize jobs can be done remotely. It has been able to be remote for some time. However, culture and time zone differences have caused projects to suffer. I'm a software dev, and our company is looking to move all devs to go remote. However, we are not sending development overseas, as that has proven time and time again to cause problems. The question is, do my wife and I move now? This is a huge thing. Outsourcing has never been as effective as companies hoped. Best case, they wind up creating a dedicated branch in their outsource country, because they still need locals to handle management and such. So instead of having a bunch of Indian developers dialing into the morning meetings with their American manager, they have an Indian branch with local manager and devs with their own projects. Indian devs don't like working the night shift any more than US devs. And the good ones aren't so desperate that you can force them to do so, like you could decades ago. Their tech economy is booming. They're in a seller's market same as Western devs. This does have the advantage of time zone coverage. If you're a service provider and your service goes down during nighttime in the West, your Eastern studios can start the troubleshooting without having to wake up your Western devs, and vice versa. Very effective. Surprised I haven't seen anyone mention this so far. We are going to have this noticeable gap in some parts of our cultural library. Some seasons of TV will be cut short. We won't see new TV created during this period. So the next year or two may have seasons postponed or shows cancelled that wouldn't have been. And that's nothing to say of the shows that kept going with massive changes. 20 years from now, when people are binge watching, say, Saturday Night Live, they're going to hit this moment when everything gets really weird. There are movies that got pushed back, shifted to streaming, or might get shelved altogether. There are likely albums that were supposed to be recorded this year that won't, so there will be a gap there. Some video games have already been pushed back and more may be. On the contrary side, we might see things like books take a bit of an uptick with people being stuck at home and able to write more. Painting/sculptures and other physical art, etc. It'll be like the writer's strike of 2007, but bigger. Sometimes you'll be watching an old show, and suddenly a season will be 1/3 as long as normal, like in The Office. And it was the writer's strike. This gap will be even bigger. I'm wondering if more people will move to the burbs. I've always loved my neighborhood in spite of having very little space and a tiny yard. But lately I wished that we lived somewhere with a bigger yard, with trees, a driveway with a basketball hoop, room for home offices, etc. Especially if telecommuting becomes more common, or if kids can't go back to school in the fall. I wouldn't mind the burbs if we actually had good public transportation in more than a handful of cities here in America. It's ridiculous that if you don't have a car/unable to drive you're almost ducked in a lot of places. People will say just use the bus. Even the bus near me is horrible. Takes 5 hours to get a 10-minute car ride/45-minute walk. And there's no subway/metro/rail system in this city. And I'm right on the edge of the city. City's too expensive. Burbs have too bad public transportation. I think America needs to heavily invest in their transportation across America. Even just reinvest nationally in the rail system would be a huge step. The UK outside of London is often the same. I can't drive or cycle in the dark because of a neurological disorder that's ruined my night vision. It's literally 2 buses at 3.50 each and an hour to go about 6 sodding miles. Duck the useless cunts running public transport at the moment. We really need to do something about it. The kids of today will be paying financially for this. The kids of tomorrow will also be paying financially for this. Our generation will be the silly grandparents wiping down groceries before we put them away. Oh grandpa, you don't have to do that. I lived through COVID-19 back in 2020 and kept you alive. Honestly, it's more sad than endearing to me. Imagine applying that logic to a person with CPTSD who has random vocal tics every second. I work in construction. A lot of different inspections are being done via FaceTime/Skype, and they are very easy to fudge. There will be issues with buildings not being up to code as a result of COVID-19. I work in insurance defense. This is great news for me. I live in a building. This is bad news for me. A huge spike of long-lasting mental illness. The suicide hotlines are up 1000% right now. Being cooped up inside for so long is breaking people down. Unfortunately, the anxiety and depression people are developing will last. Not to mention domestic violence cases. DV has gone up 100% here in my city. TBH, humans are such creatures of habit, so we'll inevitably go back to our old ways of not washing hands, going to crowded areas while sick, go on cruise ships, etc. Economically we'll change. but for the most part we'll go back to our carelessness much sooner than 20 years. Carnival apparently is taking bookings for August 1st. They said no guarantees though, and their bookings shot up 600%. So there's some evidence. Proved my point exactly. It ultimately comes down to weighing the risk of infecting vulnerable people to that of letting the majority of the world go back to normal. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video.